In this video, we're going to talk about my childhood rig coming up. Welcome back to the channel. I'm RJ Ronquillo. If you're new here, thanks for joining me. I've been getting a lot of requests to talk about my personal guitars, so I thought it would be a cool series to start doing, not only to talk about and demonstrate the guitars, but also talk about my history with them, how and why I came into possession of the particular guitar. And what better way to kick it off than with my very first rig from when I was 11 years old. I'm talking about my first guitar, my first amp, and we're gonna see if we can actually get some good tones out of this. So before we get started, if you're into these kinds of videos, don't forget to click the subscribe button and hit that bell icon to stay in the loop. When I first started taking guitar lessons when I was 10 years old, I've told this story before, but I was borrowing my dad's rig, which was basically a Kingston brand semi-hollow body with a vibrato arm. And the amp was a solid state Univox brand. They were both budget-friendly, Japanese-made pieces of gear. So after that first year and a half of taking guitar lessons at the local music store, I begged my parents for my own guitar and amp. Something a little bit more modern at the time. This was been like the mid 80s. Something a little more modern, a little better quality. There was a few factors going on that played a part in my choice of guitar. So to put you in the correct time period, this would have been around 87. I had just turned 11 years old. Guitar Player magazine actually had an issue, I think it was the August 1987 issue, so it was around my birthday. The cover had like a red Strat on it, and I think it was titled Strat Mania. So there was a huge article about the history of the Fender Strat and tons of pictures and tons of players using the Strat, which I saw on TV all the time. And also that year, I think it was July 1987. So it was around the same, summer of 1987, let's put it, was like a pivotal year in my childhood. La Bamba came out. And if you're not familiar with the movie La Bamba, it's about the story of Ritchie Valens, and Lou Diamond Phillips played Ritchie Valens. That is next to Back to the Future. Not only one of my favorite movies of all time, but one of my most influential movies as far as taking up the guitar. In the big performance scene at the very end, he's playing like a sunburst Fender Stratocaster. So immediately between that magazine and that movie, I fell in love with the Stratocaster body shape and just the styling of the Stratocaster in general. So I knew I wanted my first guitar to be a Stratocaster. Whether it was going to be a Fender or some no-name brand, I didn't know. And at this time, I wasn't even turned on to guys like Clapton or Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan. I was still listening to like Chuck Berry, Ritchie Valens, basically 50s rock and roll. And to me, the Stratocaster just looked like a classic guitar. Like when I think of what does an electric guitar look like, the Strat body shape is the first thing that came to mind. And all the guitar stores in town had a lot of Strats hanging on the wall. You had a couple different price point choices. You had Squires, you had Japanese made, you had American made. And there were some that were like, not too cheap, not too expensive, just like right in the middle, kind of 500, 600 bucks, which is kind of better than you could say for like a Les Paul at the time. Those were always expensive to me for some reason. Gibsons were always like the more expensive guitars compared to like Fenders or, Kramers or something. And a Les Paul at the time to me was also a classic shape and design that I saw all over the place on MTV and in the movies. The one music store that my dad had experience shopping at was called Marshall Music, and that was in Allen Park, which is kind of like downriver of Detroit. I remember going in there for the first time and just being in awe of like the huge drum sets that were set up, all these guitars hanging on the wall. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love music stores. So I guess I had gone into the store knowing that I wanted to look at Stratocasters, but I was still fairly green, meaning I was still kind of new at playing guitar, so I needed help from the salespeople to help pick one out. I kind of remember the salesman looked like an 80s metal guy. He had long hair, like a typical guitar salesman in the 80s, someone that probably had a band on the weekend, but this was his day gigs. And as a kid, my favorite color was blue, so I wanted a blue Strat, and there was a blue Strat on the wall. So I asked the guy if he could show me that blue Strat, which is this one, incidentally. And I remember him demonstrating it. And he was a lot older than me, obviously, but he was a lot better than me too. And I just thought he was like shredding, like that I've never seen before. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then when he was done, he gave the guitar to me and he said, go ahead, go play. And The only songs that I knew were like La Bamba, obviously, and like Walk Don't Run by the Ventures. Which is funny, because imagine a kid in the 80s playing 50s music. So yeah, this is my very first guitar. Let's talk about it a little bit. It's blue. Metallic blue, I think, is the exact name for this finish. It's very vibrant for a blue color. But this is a 1986, according to the serial number, this is a 1986 made in Japan Stratocaster. Now, it's been through a couple modifications over the years. The biggest modification was the trem system. So originally this came with a, I think it was called a System 1 tremolo, which was made by Schaller, which was a 2-point like pivot bridge, kind of like a Floyd Rose, but it wasn't a Floyd Rose. It didn't have a locking nut. They actually had the locking bracket part right here where the holes are. So, and I promptly removed that, but it had like, you know, it had fine tuners, and it wasn't the best tremolo design. I mean, compared to like a Floyd Rose, but it was fine. It was the 80s. It was the mid 80s. Everyone wanted a locking tremolo. Everybody wanted a whammy bar. It was only recently that I got this modified to a regular 6-screw Fender tremolo. I had the locking mechanism removed and a string tree added. Yeah, I mean, it stays in tune great now. The other modification that's kind of been all over the place is the pickups. These I just put in. I'll talk about these in a second. Obviously, this is my first guitar, and I didn't know much about physics or electronics, and you know, these have single coils, and I was getting so irked at the single coil hum. I didn't know anything about the hum, but it was always noisy, and it always bothered me. So I went to my local music store and I asked them about it, and they said, well, you have a couple choices. You could put either humbuckers in it, or we have these new active pickups from Seymour Duncan, and they were called live wires, I think. Those fit in perfectly. I didn't have to route, you know, for a humbucker or anything. But the thing is, they took two 9-volt batteries, so it was 18 volts that were powering these pickups, which is kind of a lot, you know? They got rid of the hum, and they were super loud, no definition whatsoever. They're like 80s active pickups. There was like no soul to them. They were just like loud and abrasive and whatever. I used those pickups probably up through college. This was like my main guitar even through college. So I had that set up like with the active pickups probably way longer than I should have had them. These are actually noiseless YJM Yngwie Malmsteen pickups. I wish these were invented back then, because I would have put these in instead of those actives. But other than that, everything is original. The frets are original, which this definitely needs a fret job, because there's a couple little boo-boos in some of these frets that hang up on the strings. And another thing that I didn't know anything about was pickup positions. You know, I had 5 choices here, and I was like, maybe I'll just keep it in the middle, because, you know, middle is good. So I played everything in the middle position, which is kind of nerdy. I mean, now I appreciate it as an adult and as like a seasoned musician, but before I had no idea like that you should put it in the bridge when you have distortion, so you get that like raucous tone, or if you want to put it in the neck to get that Hendrixy Stevie Ray Vaughan smooth tone. I didn't know any of that crap. Okay, so moving on, the amp. I knew nothing about amps. I just asked for the salesman's suggestion for a good beginner's amp, and they suggested this. This is a Peavey Backstage 50. It's a solid state, obviously. You know, most kids, in the 80s at least, our first amp, unless it's a hand-me-down amp, you know, it's not a tube amp. The solid states were always the ones that people were buying because A, they were cheaper, louder, easier to maintain. Yeah, this was kind of like my main childhood amp that I gigged with. You know, we played at school dances and talent shows and like my mom's birthday party at a Chinese restaurant. Okay, so this is not my original amp that I had when I was a kid. That is long gone, but I did find this on Reverb. The speaker has since been replaced with a Mojo Tone speaker, but unfortunately it kind of has a little bit of a problem. Hopefully you won't hear it too much when I play, but so it's a 2-channel amp. There's a clean channel and there's a dirty channel. Here is your normal gain. I like how everything is squared off into sections. That makes it all like super organized. There's the normal gain, which is basically your clean channel. There's a bright switch, And then there's the channel switch, which shifts it into the dirty channel. So the next section is the lead gain channel. There's a knob called Super Sat, which translates to being like the gain knob on a regular amp. I don't know why they call it Super Sat. Super saturation, maybe. And then the post knob, which is just the level, the master level of the gain channel. So I don't know what was up with the 80s nomenclature back then, but there's also an effects loop, which I never used because I didn't have any pedals. I didn't have any effects. And then you have your EQ section, pretty simple, low, mid, high. Here it says master reverb. Now that's just the reverb. It's got a real spring reverb in it, I think. Is that a real spring? That might be a plate reverb. And there's a headphone jack, which was very handy when I was growing up because I couldn't play loud in the living room. So I would just plug in my headphones and it sounded horrible. So I guess we're gonna try to get some tones out of this. I'll let you hear basically what my childhood tone sounded like. All knobs at noon. Yeah, that's super clean. Listen to that reverb. So let me put it in the middle position because that's where the real RJ childhood tone was. When I played that live for the first time, I didn't have the distortion on. I think I played it totally clean. I know you guys have been waiting to hear the distortion on this thing, so let's crank it up. The Super Stat. That's not bad for an 80s solid state amp. This EQ doesn't really do anything. Very minimal. Like the low knob only makes it more muffled. And the high knob just makes it louder. That was like one of the first songs I ever played with my band, The Plague. I don't know if I remember this solo. you have it, folks. My very first rig of doom. Thank you guys for joining me for that. That was fun. I'm definitely gonna have a couple more of these RJ guitar expose videos, so let me know down in the comments what guitar you'd like to see next, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks again. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, tour vlogs or guitar lesson videos, click that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.